Everyone, welcome to the Pro MMA Betting podcast. Just going to bang out a quick podcast this week. I'm late doing it, so I'm going to go through the fights very quickly this week. Just give you my picks and quick reasoning behind. Quick recap on how we got on last week as always. Took a 3-unit loss on a double that I put in place for Jonathan Martinez. Bad error on my part. I should have known better than to trust Martinez at minus 300. I know he looked very improved, but he still lost to Andrei Sukhomtov, and I know he's improved since that fight, but you can't be laying minus 300 on someone, and he got dominated in that fight as well. And improvements aside, it's only been like a couple of years, and he has definitely improved, but it was just foolish on my part. I had him in a double with Julia Ravida, so lost 3 units there. Cash Danige, that came in very easily, but I only had a unit on him, so it wasn't enough to retrieve the 3 units we lost. And on live betting, for the second week running, we only had one live betting tip. A bit quiet on live betting the last couple of weeks for me personally. The only live bet we had was we took Charles Jourdain after round 2. I sensed that his opponent was slowing down. We got near enough even money. He was about minus 115, I think, after round 2. So we put a unit on that, and that cashed for us. So we pulled back nearly 2 units of the 3 units we lost. So we lost just over a unit. It was a very busy week this week. We did have a bet for Cage Warriors yesterday. We had 2 units on Paul Hughes at minus 120. Now, these markets for Cage Warriors are low liquidity, especially the market yesterday, because the cards or odds have been available for the Cage Warriors cards for tonight and Saturday for a good number of days now. But yesterday's card, they released it really late at Bet Online, like in the afternoon. So low liquidity. You could get good lines on those Cage Warriors fights on Eurobook. So if you had access to Eurobooks, a lot of the clone sites had the odds available. And I mean, I signed up with one of the clone sites because I didn't think Bet Online were going to drop the odds, and I managed to get like 1,500 down on Paul Hughes on a clone site, which I wasn't expecting. Euro sites normally limit you very quickly, and they even straight off the bat they don't normally let you get a lot of money down. So I was quite surprised to be able to get that amount down. So it was possible if you had access to them books. And the problem with when Bet Online released it, it only takes a few people to bet it, and the line just climbs insurmountably. And he ended up closing it got a bit silly. He was up at like minus 275 at one point. But Paul Hughes did come in for us for 2 units. We've got another Cage Warriors bet as well that will take place over the next couple of days. And we've obviously got some UFC action coming up for the card this weekend. So a quick reminder, guys, we run a pre-betting service where all bets are emailed. Live betting is run through a private Discord channel. The private Discord channel is suspended during live bets. I always post my bet slips and stakes on Twitter to show you that I am betting what I'm tipping. It's a yearly service, but you can sign up for weekly, monthly or 6 monthly as well. But most members are with us for a year. That's where you get the most value for your money. So have a look at the results. Everything is tracked. There's free trackers below this video with direct links. They're also on the website, ProMMABetting.com. Give us a follow on Twitter at ProMMABetting. I often, throughout the week, let you know my thoughts on some fights that are coming up that particular weekend. And please hit the like button on this video as well, trying to get the subscribers up as quickly as we can. This podcast is different to most in the sense that it's more betting orientated. I will look at the odds and we will make our picks based on odds, and if we feel there is value on the odds. So it is betting orientated. I'm not just picking who I think is going to win. I mean, sometimes I'll go against the odds and just stick with my gut, but more often than not we will go with the odds and we'll pick the dog. And that's why we pick a lot of dogs on this podcast. Last week I thought I was unlucky with a couple of picks. I picked Manel Cape. Thought he won that fight. I was surprised the split decision went against him. And on the podcast last week as well, I also picked Courtney Casey, and I thought she deserved that decision as well. I was surprised the decision went the other way there. I thought JJ Aldridge got particularly lucky there, so felt a little bit unlucky. I can't remember how I went on picks last week. I think I was like 5 and 6 or something, but I really feel those 2 picks should have gone my way, so that would have put me at 7 and 4 instead. But it's the way the cookie crumbles. You can only hope that it evens itself out throughout the year. So let's move on to this card. As I said, I'm going to quickly break it down. It's going to be quicker than normal because I didn't really have time to do the podcast this week, but I'm trying not to miss a week, so I'd rather do something rather than nothing. So work our way from the bottom as we always do. First fight on the card is, let me just bring up the UFC website. So there's the main card. Let's go to the prelims. I think it's Julia Avila. So Julia Avila taking on Julia Stoliarenko. For me, this is Julia Avila's fight. I mean, obviously she's unplayable. If you want to find value, you need to look at Julia inside the distance, Julia KO. For a lady, she does have power. There's not many ladies that have knockout power. She is one that does. So normally when you're looking at women's MMA, you're looking at decisions more often than not. But with Julia, she's definitely a finisher. Definitely cracks. I honestly think Julia is armbar or bust. She will always try and pull guard and go for this armbar. It works on the regional scene for her. Look, it's women's MMA. I would not be shocked if she did latch an armbar up and catch Avila, but I don't see it happening. I think, I can't fault anyone for having a stab at Julia by sub. I think it's like plus 600. It's her only way to win. But I'd be more interested in, I mean, you could have a little stab at that. It's plus 600 for God's sakes. But Avila inside the distance, KO, if you want to play the fight, I think that's the way to play it. Let's just have a quick look, because I honestly don't know what. I think I did see KO earlier in the week at plus 400, but I assume it's been bet down. Yeah, it's plus 250, between plus 250 plus 350 now. Avila inside the distance, plus 175, plus 200. I mean, I'd probably split. If I wanted to play Julia, I'd put half on KO and half on inside the distance, just in case she does sub her, because you never know, club and sub. And I remember she did have, I think it was Pani Cheyanne's back for a while, off of hurting her with her hands. So be careful. Don't just go in on the KO, because then if she subs her, you're just kicking yourself. You should always split the two, in my opinion, especially when there's not that much of a difference. There's only 100 points difference between the two, so I would just take a bit of both. But yeah, Avila there definitely for me. But the money line's unplayable, goes without saying. It's women's MMA. I'd class it as lower level women's MMA, but I'm not going to pick the dog here just because I just think Avila's going to win, and I do like that she's a finisher. You're not necessarily betting on her winning the decision like you are with most women fighters that you're betting at juiced odds. I think she's got three possible paths to victory there. So, but yeah, you can't lay the money line, guys. Don't do it. Next fight on the card, we have JP Byers, Bruno Silva. I'm not surprised Bruno Silva's been bet down. He's about my plus 120 now. When I first did tape, he was plus 200. I probably should have pulled the trigger. I was kind of in two minds. I can definitely see him making it a competitive fight. Bruno gave Tagir a very competitive fight. Perhaps me having a bit of a sour taste from Bruno in my mouth stopped me pulling the trigger at plus 200, and hope I don't come to regret it, but I may do. JP Byers is a bit of an unknown. Last fight, besides the Contender Series fight I can find of him, was the one in Russia. No, it wasn't in Russia, actually. I think it was in India or Pakistan, where his opponent got disqualified and the tide was turning. JP was slowing down. The Russian he fought was starting to take over. And it looked like a bit of a quit job, to be honest, from JP Byers. And since then, the only fight I've got to go off is a Contender Series fight where the guy was just overmatched. Bruno, he's 0-3 in the UFC, but he's fought good competition. He gave Tagir a very close fight last time out. And I bet him against Dvorak, and he just didn't bring that level of intensity to the Dvorak fight that he did with Tagir. But he is 0-3 in the UFC now. And you kind of feel, is he destined to just go 0-4 and get cut? JP Byers is the young guy. And this is the other thing with JP. When I talk about that fight in India or Pakistan, I can't remember what country it was, he was training in South Africa then as well. And he was only like 21 or 22. He's been at 40s now for, I think, well over a year. He's now like 24 years of age. he should have made some big improvements. That period when you're that age, especially with the move to a camp like Fortis from training in South Africa, should definitely reap benefits. So I think the line is kind of more accurate now. It's definitely where I feel it should be lined, or closer to where I feel it should be lined. Maybe I'd have it as a pick'em personally. So I'm going to pick Bruno just because he's the dog. I should have taken that plus 200. I regret it. I've probably overthought it. But I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up going 0-4 and losing here. But it just depends on what improvements Byers has made. But it's hard to make assumptions as a bettor regarding improvements. You can only really go off what you can see on tape. And from tape, I think Bruno Silva's live here. So I've got to go with Bruno. But at the same time, if you're betting Silva, you don't really know how JP Byers is going to look. So I personally wouldn't go big on Silva here. I'm talking kind of a unit maximum in my opinion, but I haven't bet the fight. Next fight, we've got a late put together fight. We've got Montel Jackson taking on Jesse Strada. I've done no tape. I knew it was going to be ridiculous odds, so there was no point. What I did take a punt on was Montel's submission when it was plus 600. I think it's likely he finishes his fight because it's probably going to be very one-sided. So yeah, he probably wins by KO, but you've got two possible outcomes if I think there's going to be a finish, submission or KO. And I'm not saying they should be 50-50 odds-wise, but I don't think the disparity between sub and KO should be that wide. And I know he's only got one submission win, but it was against Brian Kelleher. He clubbed and subbed him basically. Entirely possible here. Montel's got very long arms. Great arms for locking up, Darce chokes, anacondas, etc. So it wouldn't shock me if something similar happened here. So I had to take a stab in it. But yeah, I'm going with Montel. Trevin Giles, Roman Dolidze next. I know a lot of people that like Trevin Giles here. But personally, as listeners will know, over the last month or so, I've made a solemn pledge that I am not going to be betting on flakes anymore. Trevin Giles falls under the flake banner for me. The Zach Cummins fight and the fight IQ against Gerald Meerschaert, and then the James Krause fight where he was a much bigger man and he didn't win that decision. That was a robbery in my opinion. It turned out that Trevin Giles' ex-BJJ coach was one of the judges and he actually scored round one for Giles, which enabled him to win the decision, which is scandalous in my opinion. Giles had his Krause had his back for 4 minutes of round one. Yes, Giles did finish strong. I don't think that outweighs someone on your back for 4 minutes, though, hunting for a submission. I thought it was a scandalous decision. And, yeah, I can understand why people like him here, because Roman Dolidze is someone that I can't wait to fade. I think he's very limited. He gets by on his power. I had a little bet on the guy he fought last time. I can't remember his name. I've got it in front of me, and it was a winnable fight, but he made some mistakes, and Roman was able to capitalise and get the decision. So he's moving down to middleweight as well here, Roman. So he's going to be very big. I wonder how his cardio is going to hold up. I mean, he looked big at light heavyweight, so I don't know how the cut's going to go, and if it's particularly tough, how he's going to hold up in a high-paced fight. But Trevin Giles, high-paced fight, from what I've seen, not really the kind of fight he's likely to deliver, but he did have a war with the guy that's fighting at heavyweight now in the UFC. I can't remember his name. I think it was in LFA. They had a bit of a war, but I guess that's the other guy bringing the war to him. Roman's quite low volume, and Trevin Giles would be kind of happy with that, I'd imagine, trying to pick him from the outside. And it is a winnable fight for Trevin Giles, but I can't bet him. And I'm going to pick Roman just because Roman hasn't shown that he's a flake to me. I'm just anti-flake at the moment. So I'm going to pick Roman just purely based on my regard for Giles being a flake. But I can see why people are betting Giles. He can stylistically win this fight. He's definitely the better striker. If he can keep it on the feet, keep on the outside, keep away from Roman's bombs and not engage in the grappling like he did with Gerald Meerschaert, and defend takedowns, because I don't think that he's got great takedowns. I'm not enamoured with his stand-up. He's low volume. I remember watching him on the regionals. It doesn't really do much, and he just land a bomb. So, that stuff doesn't work in the UFC, not as you step up your level at least. But I'm just going to pick him here. Just it's a fade on Giles, even though Roman's the favourite, and probably should pick Giles as he's the dog. I normally would pick Giles here in this kind of situation, but because I regard him as a flake, I'm picking Roman. Leonardo Santos, Grant Dawson next. Really interesting fight, this one, because stylistically this is a tough fight for Grant, but Leo, his gas tank's horrible, and he's like 41, 42 now. I just wonder what Grant Dawson's strategy is here. He trains with James Krause, so I think he's going to come in with a good game plan. I imagine, personally, I would expect him to maybe look for a lot of work on the fence, because I think he'd be wary of taking Santos down while Santos is fresh. And on the feet, Santos is the better striker. He's a good striker. And Dawson did get rocks at the end of his fight with Nad Narimani. He got hurt. I mean, he dominated the fight, but he did get hurt. But, you know, Nad's size-wise, Grant's also moving up to 155 here from 145. So he's not going to be able to bully Leo like he did Nad, basically. He got takedowns easy enough. He worked the calf kicks. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting fight. But Grant will definitely take over as Leo slows, and Grant does fight at a high pace. I'm just really intrigued to see what his approach to this fight is. So I definitely can't lay any money on Dawson at minus 200. I think if you're a live bettor, this is potentially a great live bet fight. If Leo starts well, he is going to slow down. I'm not just basing that off his last fight. If you go back through his fights historically, he always slows down in fights. And he is up there in age as well. I mean, but he's quite young in fight years. Like, he's not had a lot of wars, etc. But still, you're in your early 40s competing in the UFC against young guns. It's tough. So I'm going to pick Grant. Just, you know, if Leo we wouldn't be getting this line if Leo had cardio at the end of the day. But that gas tank, and I don't like betting on someone, especially as a favourite, if I feel like I need their opponent to gas. I don't like doing that. I learned that lesson the hard way a long time ago, so I don't do it anymore. But I'm pretty confident Leo gasses here, especially if Grant makes it a high-paced fight. But I'm just interested to see his approach. But I'm going to pick Grant Dawson, but I'm not touching it, and I wouldn't recommend anyone should pre-bet it. I think live bet is the way with this fight. Marion, Reneau, Macy, Kenan. I discussed this fight, I'm sure, last time it was scheduled, because I think it got cancelled the day of or the day before. I'm still sticking with Marion Reneau here. I think the odds are too wide. We haven't seen Macy for a year. She may have improved. I mean, if you go back and listen to the video I done on the fight the first time, you'll get a more succinct breakdown. I haven't retaped it, but I am picking Marion here. Macy lives in the clinch. She's a bit of a mess. I mean, Marion might gas. That is a worry. She did gas against Raquel. A lot of that fight was in the clinch. And she is like, you know, again, she's another fighter here in her early 40s. She's like 43, I think. So, you know, it's kind of weird picking a 43-year-old, but I'm picking her here based on the odds. She's like nearly plus 200. I think that's crazy for someone like Macy Kason's style. It's a winnable fight for Marion. So I'm going to pick Marion. But if you bet it, I think it is going to be a messy fight. I think it's kind of got split decision written all over it. But I think the value is with Marion. Next fight on the card. We're on to the main card now. We've got Tuivasa taking on late replacement Harry Hunsucker. What we saw Harry on the Contender Series. I mean, he started well enough against, I think it was Van der Aar he fought. He was throwing hands at him, and then he just ended up getting dumped down and pounded out. I chat with a guy who said he's seen Harry fight live 3 times and says he's abysmal. Ty is minus 400, minus 500, so it's unplayable. It's heavyweight, guys. Anything can happen. I really wouldn't be putting him in parlays. There's no props out yet, besides the over-under, which is set at 1.5, not surprisingly, and the under is minus 200. Personally, it's just a pass fight for me. I mean, it probably finishes under, but minus 200 doesn't shriek a value to me. I mean, if I remember rightly, I think Hunsucker gassed on the Contender Series, and he's taken this on short notice. Yeah, I mean, I've got to pick Ty, even though the line's, unplayable. He didn't look good. Ty's not bad. So I'm going to go with Ty, but if you're a bettor, just, unless you're going to have a punt on the dog, which I don't think you should here, but otherwise, just pass, guys. I mean, I don't know what Thai KO will be. It's going to be juiced. Just leave the fight alone. But yeah, I've got to pick Thai to win that one. Next up, we have Song Kenan taking on Max Griffin. So Song Kenan is... And I've done tape on him, and it's just underwhelming. He dropped the first round to Aldana. He got 30-27 by Morono. I think he lost the Krantz fight. I mean, round 1 is close. That's the round that decides the fight. I gave it to Krantz. I'm sure it was round 1 that decides the fight. Maybe it's round 2. I can't remember. But there's one round that's very close. I think it was round 1. I gave it to Krantz. I mean, I bet him against Potter, but that's because I just held Potter in such low regard. But he's just got holes in his game. I mean, the aforementioned regarding the fights, and then he slows down. I mean, against Krantz, hands on his knees. I think there was another fight I watched of his where he slowed down as well. I think it was the Morono fight. I mean, Morono slows as well, so they both slowed down in round 3 there. His takedown defence is poor. I mean, he's a good athlete. You can see from his physique he's a good athlete, but there's just a lot of holes in his game. Max Griffin, you know, he's been a bit hot and cold in the UFC. He'll have a good performance and he'll lose a fight. You know, there's been some questionable fight IQ, like the Morono fight. He had a clear wrestling advantage. I bet Max in that fight, and he didn't use it until round 3 when he was 2 rounds down, and he absolutely ragdolled Morono in round 3. It was so frustrating, but that maybe taught him a lesson. He did mix in the wrestling with Brazilian Cowboy. I mean, Brazilian Cowboy is very strong physically and a decent enough wrestler himself, and that was a very close fight. It could have gone either way. And then he fought smart last time out against Ruiz. Fought technical, didn't get dragged into a brawl, and I mean the ending was horrific when his ear was hanging off. So, I mean, the line is a bit wide now. He's up at, you know, Max is up at like minus 210, I think, last time I looked, minus 205. But I've got to pick Max here. Song has just been so underwhelming to me. I mean, I know he got that quick knockout win when he first came into the UFC. So, you know, he's got some power. He knocked out Aldana, but I think he's probably KO or bust here. Max, I know he's been hurt a few times, but he's never been KO'd. The Kobe Covington loss, yeah, but that was more a mercy stoppage. You know, he's tough. And Max can mix in the wrestling. I think if he stands on the feet for 3 rounds, it's still a winnable fight for Max. But if he fights smart, there's definitely a path to victory using his wrestling here as well. So I have to pick Max here just because I feel Song is KO or bust basically, and Max is a tough guy. Next, Adrian Yanez taking on Gustavo Lopez. I think this is going to be a firefight. This could be one of the best fights of the night. Lopez, I remember I caught his line against Anthony Burchak at about plus 140, and he came in and just dominated him. He's shown on combat that he's got some serious power. He got some nasty knockouts on there. I can't remember the guy he fought. He lost the decision, and then he rematched him, and he just fought completely differently. Got on the front foot, got after him, and got the knockout in the first round. Yanez likes to get in your face, volume heavy approach. I didn't love his fight with Estrada in LFA. He made that a lot closer than perhaps it should have been, and since then he's fought 2 kind of sketchy opponents he was expected to beat, and you know he's got hype because he's coming off 2 quick round 1 wins. You always have to be careful of falling into that trap. People love quick KO wins, and it's always reflected in the betting lines. I do like Yanez though. I like his volume. I like his pressure. He's got a good chin. I don't like the line here though at plus 200. I did have a think about it when I first taped, but I just couldn't pull the trigger. I'm still going to pick him here, but from a betting perspective, it's a no-no for me. I think this fight he is going to be tested, so let's see how he looks properly tested. Let's not base him off of 2 quick KO wins against guys that he was expected to beat. And Gustavo Lopez, he's looked good his last few fights. He's aggressive as well. I think this is going to be a banger. And Yanez does seem to have a really solid chin, but you know, strange things happen in that small octagon. So I'm going to go Yanez, but I wouldn't be shocked by the upset here. Next, we've got Cheyanne Byers taking on Montserrat Ruiz. Gutted here. Byers was meant to fight Kay Hansen, I had a 3 unit bet on her. I got it all my money down at about minus 140, and then Hansen pulled out, and they bring Ruiz in, and now Bias is like a minus 350 favourite. I'm high on Bias, but word of caution, guys, be careful laying the chalk here on Bias, because I said this last week with regards to Gloria De Paula. I liked what I saw on Contender Series. I said her striking looked very good, and it did look good against Frey when they were standing, but it was ultimately the grappling she couldn't deal with. But I said, be careful betting someone based off of a performance on Contender Series against someone who isn't very good. And everyone fell into that trap that bet her last week. She looked good against someone who, as I said last week, was basically a judoka doing MMA. 2 years before the last fight I could find, she looked awful. She'd clearly improved, you could tell, in that fight on Contender Series, but she was fighting a nobody, and she had a step up. I know Frey isn't great, but it still was a big step up in competition. Bias, again, she fought a nobody on Contender Series, looked great. What I will say about Bias is that I just like her fundamentally. Everything she'd done in that fight I thought was right. I think she looks a lot more solid than someone like Gloria De Paula. She's not going to be taken down easy. I don't really think that's a threat here anyway. Ruiz is literally head and arm throw or bust. But I do think Bias is a lot more solid than De Paula. Hence why I had the bet on her against Hansen. But minus 350. Look, I'm still going to pick Bias here. I'm not going against my gut because I've got high hopes for Bias. But minus 350, it's a no-no, guys. It's low-level MMA. And like I said, she's coming off a win. She hasn't beaten anyone, but I'm doing the eye test here, and with my experience from watching this sport for many years, my experience training in it, I think she passes the test fundamentally. I think she's a solid prospect, whereas Gloria De Paula, I was definitely more on the fence. Bias, I think she's an interesting addition to the division, and I think she's going places, and she's at 40s as well, which always helps being at a good camp, but minus 350, the debut. She hasn't really fought anyone. She has done what she's supposed to do, though. In the fights I've seen, she's performed well. She fought Helen Peralta, who's a beast, a few years back. And I remember watching that fight before her Contender Series fight. And she got outstruck the first 2 rounds, which there's no shame in that. And this is going back a few years as well. And then she came back in round 3, and I think she won the round. And Peralta's a beast. Like, for a woman, she is a beast. So I liked seeing that. Bias she seems like a fighter, is what I'm trying to say. Like, 100% fighter, not someone that's doing it for the fame, like a lot of them seem to be. She's in it because she likes fighting. And I mean, Ruiz is Mexican, so I'm sure she is as well, but she's very limited. She looked a bit better though last time out. I mean, it was a short fight. Her last fight, I think it was LFA, so it was hard to see how much she had improved compared to her fight a couple of years earlier where she lost to Danielle Taylor. But she looks like someone that'll get in your face. She'll trade blows with you. What I don't like is in her last fight, she was still going for the head and arm throw, which she did actually hit and got the submission from it. But it's basic beginner stuff. It's not going to work on Bias, and she highly likely will end up flat down on her face with Bias on her back, flattened out, punching her in the head. But she put some decent hands together. She was throwing in combination, so you just got to be careful. I'm still picking Bias here, but I wouldn't be betting her, guys. Not at minus 350, low-level women's MMA. But I'm sticking with my gut here because of my my thoughts on Cheyanne, and I think she's a solid prospect. Co-main event, we've got Gregor Gillespie returning, taking on Brad Riddell. Gregor, he's coming back from a long layoff here. The one concern here is, has he fully recovered confidence-wise from that KO loss to Kevin Lee? Because otherwise, this is a very winnable fight for him. Brad Riddell, he's a solid striker, but so in his last fight, he got held down in round 1. The guy gassed. You go back and watch the Malarkey fight. Malarkey even hit a few takedowns. He fought the Russian in his next fight after the Malarkey fight, and I don't think the Russian really got him down, but there was a lot of time where the Russian had control on the fence, and he hasn't really, that Russian chap. I remember taping him for another fight, and that's not really his style. Or maybe I taped him for the Riddell fight. He hadn't really done that before. He'd been more of a striker. So to do that to Riddell kind of raised questions. And, Brad's a late addition to MMA, so maybe it's something he's working on. Well, it is something he's working on clearly, but it's just not going to be enough to to stop Gillespie. So I expect Gillespie to win. He's been bet up a lot. I mean, at one point he got bet down to -150. Wish I'd taped it at that point, so I would have taken Gillespie. Now he's up at, you're talking -250s, which is a bit sketch, especially with Gregor. Just where is he at mentally coming back from that KO? But I've got to take Gregor here. Main event, we have Kevin Holland taking on Derek Brunson. I'm going with Brunson here, guys, especially at +150. I think this is a very winnable fight for him. Kevin Holland's weakness has always been takedown defense. He's not big for middleweight either. I mean, he's fluttered with moving down to 170. He's never done it. I'm not sure if he's ever historically before the UFC fought at 170, but he did have a fight. I can't remember who it was against. He did have a fight scheduled at 170. I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Rodriguez maybe? But he pulled out anyway, injured, and then he's since gone back to fighting at middleweight. I don't think he really cuts much weight. Now, Derek Brunson is a big physical middleweight, very, very good wrestler. Now, he went through a period in his career where he thought he could just blitz everyone in round one. And I remember riding that train. I bet him about 5 fights in a row, and he kept delivering. I remember the wheels came off against Rob Whittaker when bazooka mode in round one against Rob. Rob survived, and then he just got finished. But he's moved to Sanford. I think he was at Jackson Wink, and then he started doing his own camps for a while. But he's been at Sanford for his last 3 fights, and he's fought very intelligently his last 3 fights, and he's come away with 3 Ws. There's a clear path here against Kevin Holland. It's a small cage as well, which favours Derek. He can definitely wrestle, and I think he can kind of ragdoll Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is not great off of his back. You can go and watch the Brendan Adam fight to see that. You can watch the Gerald Meerschaert fight to see that. You can even watch the round 3 of the Darren Stewart fight to see that. Now, I know he's coming off a weird win over Jacare, where he basically knocked him out from the bottom. But Jacare still hit 2 very easy takedowns before that happened. The guy's takedown defense isn't good. And he slows down in fights. Darren Stewart fight, he slowed down. Gerald Meerschaert fight, he slowed down. The guy's gas tank. If Brunson can make this a wrestle-heavy, grindy fight, I think he's going to slow down. Now, I know I said earlier I don't like betting on someone when I feel that their opponent needs to gas, but I don't necessarily feel he needs to gas to be able to win this fight, because Brunson can still get takedowns whether Holland's fresh or not, and he can keep him on the mat whether he's fresh or not, just because Holland isn't great off his back. And secondly, when I mentioned that earlier, that particular person was the favourite. Derek Brunson is the underdog here. So that makes a difference as well. If you said to me this is going to be on the feet for as long as it lasts, then yeah, you've got to favour Kevin Holland. He's got very good boxing. He's got a very, very good chin. He takes a shot really well. He rolls very well with punches. So he's definitely got the advantage on the feet. And I expect he will win this fight if it plays out on the feet. And Derek Brunson has been stopped a lot as well. But, you look at who Derek Brunson's lost to. And, he's lost to real good fighters. He lost to Jacare, and that was like 3 years ago. More your prime kind of Jacare. Jacare's definitely lost a step now. The Jacare that Kevin Holland fought. Lost to Rob Whittaker. He lost to Yoel Romero. And I remember that fight very well because I bet Yoel Romero in that fight. And he was getting out-wrestled by Brunson. Brunson was 2 rounds up. It was only because Brunson slowed down and Yoel managed to hurt him on the feet and then pound him out. And I always remember that just because I was on Yoel and he was 2 rounds down. It was looking like it was done, and then he came back and won. So he's only lost to really good fighters, Derek Brunson. And then, the Anderson Silva loss, but, most people regard that as a win for Derek Brunson. Silva got a generous decision there. So if he fights smart, it's definitely a winnable fight. He fights out that southpaw stance. If he can throw the left hand to back Kevin Holland up. Obviously on the feet is the danger. Like I said, he has been knocked out a few times, albeit against, high-level competition. And he still holds his chin high. He's never fixing that issue. When he throws, his chin's out there to be countered. So, look, he might walk onto something. I mean, Holland historically hasn't been a massive puncher. he's not been knocking many people out. Hernandez was a body shot, and I know he knocked out Buckley, but besides that, he's not really known for his power punching. But if you're betting Brunson, you obviously don't want him hanging around on the feet getting caught with shots, because he might get put down by one. But there's just a clear path to victory here for Brunson for me if he fights smart, and he's shown that he is fighting smart now. He's at Sanford. 3 fights in a row he's fought smart. I think he needs to push the wrestling a bit more here than perhaps he has. He was a little bit slow starting with the wrestling against Edmund, but I think if he can just get on Holland here, just make it grindy from the start. Just grind him. Ragdoll him. I think it's a winnable fight. So for me, plus 150, I've got to go with Brunson. I wonder how this would have been lined if Holland wasn't coming off that weird win over Jacare. Probably be more like an even line. It wouldn't even shock me if Brunson was a slight favourite, perhaps. So Brunson for me, I'm going with Brunson. Yeah, he might get knocked out, but I think the value is with him at the current line, 100%. So Derek Brunson for me. That wraps up the card, guys. A bit quicker than usual, but as I say, I wasn't going to do it, but I don't want to miss any weeks this year. I know it was a bit sketchy last year. I've missed quite a few, so I'm trying to keep churning them out. Good luck with your bets. If you want to sign up for a membership, ProMMABetting.com. You can message me on Twitter at ProMMABetting if you've got any questions. There will be boxing live bet before the UFC this week. We've also got Cage Warriors going on the same time as the boxing, and we've got some action on Cage Warriors. And the UFC will follow swiftly on from the boxing / Cage Warriors. So we're probably going to have like a 10, 11, 12 hour betting marathon on Saturday. So good luck with your bets. Hope you cash. And I'll be back next week to break down next week's card. Good luck, everyone.